Lex, what do you really want to talk about? That's always my question to you.
That always gets me. That's a good maybe you are the therapist.
But like you and I could talk about
anything.
People love, up until now at least, people have loved listening to the two of us in conversation.
Yeah.
And my feeling is that we're not talking about neural nets. And we're not talking about geometric unity. And we're not talking about where distributed computing might go. And I don't think that we're really focused on some of the most exciting things we could do to transform education. We're still caught in this world of other people that we don't belong in. I don't belong in the world as it's been created. I'm trying to build a new world, and I'm astounded that the people with the independent means to help build that world are so demotivated that they don't want to build new structures. And the people who do want to build new structures seem to be wild-eyed.
Wild-eyed? What do you mean by wild-eyed? They're not.
I guarantee you that I will get some message in my DMs that says, "Hey, Eric, I'm a third-year chemistry student at South Dakota State, and I've got a great idea. I just need funding. I want to build."
They don't have the means. So the people who have the means
or the sophistication, it's like you're looking for somebody who's proven themselves a few times to say, I've got $4 billion behind me that's soft circled. I want to figure out what a new university would be and what it would take to protect academic freedom and who we would hire and what are the different characteristics, because I can clearly see that everything following the current model is falling apart. Nobody, in my understanding, is saying that. Nobody is saying, let's take that which is functioning independently and make it less vulnerable. Let's boost those signals.
And a critical component as money, you think?
It's not only that, but it's also a kind of, these people are mobbed up, hands off. Let's imagine for the moment that Sundar Pichai, Jack Dorsey, and Mark Zuckerberg founded a university come social media entity.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, the purpose of this is to make sure that academic freedom will not perish from this earth because it's necessary to keep us from all going crazy. And we are going to lock ourselves out. We've come up with this governance system. And the idea is that these people will be assigned the difficult task of making sure that society doesn't go crazy in any particular direction, that we have a fact-based, reality-based, feasibility-based understanding. We can try to figure out where our real opportunities are. So it feels like everybody with the ability to do something like that, and with the brains and experience and the resources, would rather sit in the current system and hope to figure out where they can flee to if the whole thing comes apart.
Well, yeah, I mean, maybe to push back on a little bit, I agree with you, but it feels like some people are trying that. So, for example, Google purchased DeepMind. DeepMind is a company that kind of represents a lot of radical ideas. They've become acceptable, actually. AGI, artificial general intelligence, used to be really radical of a thing to talk about. And DeepMind and OpenAI are two places which has made it more acceptable. I know you can now start to criticize, well, they're really, now that it's become acceptable, they're not taking the further step of being more and more radical. But, that was an attempt by Google to say that let's try some wild stuff.
Sort of like Boston Dynamics.
Sort of like Boston Dynamics. Boston Dynamics is a really good example of trying radical ideas for perhaps no purpose whatsoever except to try out their ideas.
Well, the idea is that innovation is like dessert, and you can have dessert after you solve the problem of the main course, and the main course is a bunch of insoluble problems. So the idea is we can get into innovation once we perfect ourselves.
And you're saying that we need to make innovation the main meal.
Well, I'm saying that there really is structural oppression. I mean, if you train a deep learning system on exclusively white faces, it's going to get confused.
Yeah.
So let's not disagree that there are real issues around this. In fact, that's an issue of innovation in data. Your data should be responsive. On the other hand, there are things we can't do anything about that are actually, fundamental. And those things may have to do with the fact that, some of us taste cilantro as soap and some of us don't. Like, there are differences between people, and some of them are in the hardware, some of them are in the firmware, some of them are in the software that is the human mind. And this completely simplistic idea that every failure of an organization to promote each person who has particular intersexual characteristics, we cannot hold progress hostage to that.
And you've talked about, perhaps we'll save this for another time because it's such a fascinating conversation. You talked about this with Glenn Beck, is the whole sort of stagnation of growth and all that kind of stuff. Your idea is that in as much as the current situation is a kind of Ponzi scheme, the current situation in the United States is a kind of Ponzi scheme built on the promise of constant, unending innovation. We need to fund the true innovators and encourage them and empower them and sort of culturally say that this is what this country is about, is,
well, let's put it this way.
The brilliant minds.
We're going to kill each other if we don't grow. Growth is like an immune system, and you always have pathogens present. But if you don't have growth present, you can't fight the pathogens in your society. And right now, the pathogens are spreading everywhere. So if we don't get growth into our system fairly quickly, we are in really seriously bad shape. So it's very important that if I had a horrible person who was capable of building something that would give us all a certain amount of what I've called financial beta to some new technology, where we all benefit. Let's say quantum computing comes in and everybody, the dry cleaner has a quantum computing angle, right?
Yes.
Okay. That's necessary to keep this system that we built going. We can try to redesign the system, but our system expects growth, and we've starved it for growth. And the madness that we're seeing is the failure of our immune system to be able to handle the pathogens that have always been present. So people, can say, well, this was always there. Yes, it was. What's changed was your immune system. We have got to make sure that, one, we understand why diversity is potentially really important. We have mined certain communities to death. You and I are Ashkenazi Jews. Everyone knows that Ashkenazi Jews are good at technical stuff. We know that the Chinese are good at technical stuff. The Indians have many people who are good at technical stuff, as the Japanese. I also believe that we have communities where, if you think about the Pareto idea of diminishing returns, if you've never mined a community, many of the people you're going to get at the beginning are going to be amazing. Because that community, it's like, did you drill for more oil in Texas? Texas is pretty thoroughly picked over. Do you find some place that's, completely insane? Maybe there's oil there. Who knows? In particular, I would like to displace our reliance on our military competitors in Asia, in our scientific laboratories, with women, with African Americans, with Latinos, people who are in different categories than we have traditionally sourced. And I would like to get them the money that the market would normally give these fields were we not using visas in place of payment, right? Now, I have a crazy idea, which is that you and I both play music. And I find the analytic work that I do when I'm trying to figure out chord progressions and symmetries and tritones and all these sorts of things to be very similar to the work that I do when I do physics or math. I believe that one of the things that is true is that the analytic contributions of African Americans to music are probably fungible to science. I don't know that that's true. It's true. I haven't done controlled research, but I believe that it is very important to let the People's Republic of China know that they are not staffing our laboratories anymore, and that we need to look to our own people. And in particular, we are going to get a huge benefit from making sure that women, Black Americans, Latinos are in a position to take over some of these things, because many of these communities have been underutilized. Now, I don't know if that's an insane idea. I want to hear somebody tell me why it's an insane idea. But I believe that part of what we need to do is we need to recognize that there are security issues, there are geopolitical issues with the funding of science, and that what we've done is we've starved our world for innovation. And if we don't get back to the business of innovation, we should be doing diversity and inclusion out of greed rather than guilt. Now, part of the problem with this is that a lot of the energy behind diversity and inclusion is based on guilt and accusation.
Yeah.
And what I want is I want to kick ass. And my hope is that diminishing returns favors mining the communities that have not been traditionally mined in order to extract output from those communities. Unless there's a flaw in that plan. If there's a flaw, somebody needs to tell me. If there isn't a flaw, we need to get greedy about innovation rather than guilty about innovation.
That's really brilliantly put. My biggest problem with what I see is it exactly speaks to that in the discussion as diversity. It's used when it's grounded in guilt. It's then used as a hammer to shame people that don't care about diversity enough.
F that shit. Okay? So my point is, I'm excited about the idea of Jimi Hendrix doing quantum field theory. I'm excited about the idea of Art Tatum trying to figure out what the neural nets figured out about protein folding. Mm-hmm. I have some idea of the level of intellect of people who have not found their way into STEM subjects in incredibly technically demanding areas. And if there's a flaw in that theory, I want somebody to present the flaw. But right now, my belief is that these things are merit-based. And if you really believe in structural oppression, you do not want an affirmative action program. You want to make sure that people have huge amounts of resources to get themselves into position. I want to push out, I just tried this on this Clubhouse application. I want to push out Klein bottles as a secret sign inside of rap videos in hip hop, right? Mm-hmm. I want people to have an idea that there's an amazing world. And I want to get the people who hopefully I'm trying to lure into science and engineering. I want to get them paid. I don't want them as the cheap substitutes for the fleeing white males who have learned that they can't make any money in science and engineering.
Yeah.
So the problem is that we need to take over the ship, Lex. And it doesn't need to be you and me, because quite honestly, I have no desire to administer. I don't want to be the chief executive officer of anything. What I do want is I want the baby boomers who've made this mess and can't see it to be gone. They had almost all of our universities. And I want fresh blood, fresh resources. I want academic freedom. And I want greed for our country and for the future to determine diversity and inclusion, as opposed to shame and guilt, which is destroying our fabric.
That's as good of a diversity statement as I've ever heard.